Welcome to Boring History for Sleep, a sanctuary where the weight of the modern world dissolves into the quiet whispers of the past. And tonight, we embark on a journey through the fog shrouded streets of 13th century Germany to uncover a mystery that has remained etched into the stone of the Weser Valley for over 700 years. And as you settle into the warmth of your blankets and let the rhythm of your breath become slow and steady, like the turning of a great wooden wheel, we invite you to close your eyes and step into the invisible city of Hamelin, where the shadows are long and the secrets are deep, and where the sound of a distant flute still echoes through the timber-framed alleys and across the silent cathedral square. And this is not just a story, but an immersion into a landscape of pure atmosphere, where the boundary between what is real and what is legend becomes as thin as a thread of silk. And as you listen to the steady cadence of this continuous history, you will find yourself drifting further away from the noise of the day and deeper into the velvet darkness of a dreamless rest, where every word is a step toward the heart of the mountain and every silence is a gateway to the absolute peace of the eternal night. The Chronicles of Hamelin, a deep sleep journey. The sun begins to dip below the horizon of the year 1284 in the quiet town of Hamelin, where the Weser River flows with a gentle silver ripple that sounds like a constant whisper against the ancient stone embankments, and the cobblestone streets are winding and narrow, lined with timber-framed houses that lean toward one another as if sharing secrets of the centuries gone by, and the air is cool and still carrying the faint scent of damp earth and wood smoke from the hearths that are slowly dying down for the night as the townspeople prepare for a rest that has been long delayed by the frantic scurrying of thousands of tiny paws that once filled the walls and the floorboards with a relentless noise that seemed to never end until the arrival of the mysterious stranger who wore a coat of many colors and carried a flute made of dark polished wood that caught the last rays of the fading amber light. And as he stepped through the town square, his presence brought a sudden and heavy silence that felt like a thick velvet blanket being laid over the frantic energy of the village. And he promised with a voice as calm as a deep well that he could rid the town of its burden if only they would agree to his terms. And when he placed the flute to his lips, the first note that emerged was not a sharp sound, but a low vibrating hum that seemed to resonate within the very stones of the cathedral and the foundations of the houses. And as he walked toward the river, the sound grew richer and more complex, like a lullaby woven from the wind, and the shadows and the rodents emerged from every crack and crevice, moving in a rhythmic, trance-like procession, following the piper as he led them toward the deep, cold waters of the Weser, where the current was slow and steady, and as the water closed over them, the town was left in a state of profound stillness that it had not known for many seasons. And yet the peace was fragile, because the promises made in the heat of desperation were forgotten once the danger had passed. And when the piper returned for his due, the air grew cold and the birds stopped singing in the trees that bordered the town walls. And instead of anger, the piper simply smiled, a sad and knowing smile. And once more, he raised the flute to his lips. But this time, the melody was different. It was higher and sweeter, like the sound of a summer meadow filled with wildflowers. and the laughter of 1,000 hidden voices, and the children of Hamelin began to stir from their beds, and their play, moving with eyes wide, and dreaming as if they were seeing a world far more beautiful than the one they lived in. And they followed the piper out of the gates and toward the mountain called Koppen, where the earth itself seemed to open up to welcome them into a realm of eternal stories and quiet wonders, where the passage of time is irrelevant and the weight of the world is lifted from the shoulders, and they vanished into the mist, leaving behind a town that would forever be defined by the silence of their absence and the echoes of a flute that can still be heard if one listens closely to the wind on a quiet night, when the stars are bright and the mind is ready to drift into the depths of a dreamless sleep, where every breath is a step further into the history of a place that exists between reality and legend. As the sun fully disappears and the shadows stretch long and thin across the marketplace, the timbered houses of Hamelin seem to lean closer together, forming a canopy of ancient oak and plaster that traps the cool evening mist within the narrow alleys, where the sound of one's own breathing becomes a rhythmic anchor to the present moment, and the cobblestones underfoot are worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, each stone holding a silent memory of the year 1284, when the air felt thick with a strange electric anticipation that no one could quite name or explain, and the heavy wooden doors of the bakery and the blacksmith shop are bolted shut with iron latches that clink softly in the breeze, while the smell of cold ash and dried lavender lingers in the doorway like a ghost of the day's labor. And far off in the distance, beyond the city walls, the Weser River continues its eternal journey toward the sea with a sound that is less like water and more like the steady turning of a great cosmic wheel that governs the cycles of waking and dreaming. And as the piper begins his walk for the second time, his colorful coat seems to glow with a light that does not come from the moon, but from the music itself, which flows from the dark wood of his flute in waves of silver and gold that wrap around the sleeping chimneys and the silent bells of the church tower. And this melody is not meant for the earth or the heavy things of the world, but for the spirit of the youth who hear it as a call to a land where the grass never fades and the water is always clear as crystal, and the children rise from their feather beds, not with fear, but with a profound sense of belonging, as if they have been waiting for this specific vibration since the moment they were born, and they move through the hallways of their homes like shadows through a forest, stepping over the creaking floorboards without making a sound, and their eyes are fixed on a point far beyond the horizon where the stars meet the earth at the peak of the mountain called Koppen. And as they gather in the square, the silence is so deep that you can hear the rustle of their linen tunics and the soft patter of their bare feet on the cool earth, which feels like a heartbeat beneath them. And the piper does not look back. He simply continues to play a song that tells of hidden gardens and cities made of light that exist just behind the veil of our waking eyes, where there is no hunger and no cold and no passage of hours to worry the mind. And the procession moves slowly out of the eastern gate, passing the ancient watchtower where the guards have fallen into a slumber so deep that even the trumpets of war could not wake them, because the music has woven a web of peace around the entire valley, and as they climb the foothills, the mist rises to meet them, swirling around their ankles like white silk, and the trees of the forest bow their branches in a silent salute to the innocence that is passing by, and the mountainside begins to shimmer and fade, becoming translucent like a dream that is about to end, yet never quite does, and the earth opens its heavy stone doors to reveal a path lined with glowing moss and singing stones that resonate with the same frequency as the flute, and one by one, they step into the heart of the mountain, leaving the world of maps and clocks behind forever, while the echo of the final note lingers in the valley for 7 days and 7 nights, slowly dissolving into the whisper of the wind and the rustle of the leaves until it becomes a part of the very soil of Hamelin itself. The chronicles of Hamelin, the echoes of Bungalowsenstrasse, the silence that followed the departure of the children was not a hollow void, but a heavy and lingering presence that settled into the very cracks of the city walls and remained there for centuries to come, especially in the narrow passage now known as the Street Without Drums, where to this very day no music is allowed to be played and no dance is permitted to break the solemn stillness of the air, because the memory of that midsummer day in 1284 is still etched into the timber and the stone like a scar that refused to fade. And as you walk down this street in your mind, you can feel the coolness of the shadows that never seem to lift even when the midday sun is at its peak and the atmosphere is thick with the weight of 1,000 untold stories, and the invisible city of Hamelin begins to reveal itself to those who are on the verge of a sleep, where the physical buildings of the Abu modern world dissolve into the spectral outlines of the medieval past, and the sound of the Weser River becomes a rhythmic pulse that matches the steady rise and fall of your chest as you drift further away from the noise of the present and into the deep history of the valley, where the fog rolls off the water and snakes through the gates of the town like a silent sentinel guarding the secrets of the mountain called Koppen, and the scholars of old would sit by candlelight poring over the leather-bound ledgers of the town's archives, finding the brief and chilling entry that simply states, "It has been so many years since our children led away by a piper vanished into the earth." And this simple sentence carries more weight than any epic poem, because it is the raw vibration of a mystery that has no ending. And as the night deepens over the modern rooftops, the spirit of the piper is said to still wander the perimeter of the forest, his many-colored coat now muted by the silver light of the moon, and his flute, silent yet still held to his lips, as he waits for the world to become quiet enough to hear the song of the mountain once again, and the trees in the surrounding woods stand like tall dark pillars of a cathedral that has no roof but the stars, and their roots reach deep into the soil, where perhaps the children still play, in a realm where time has stopped, and the flowers never wilt, and the light is always the soft gold of a perpetual dawn. And as you visualize this hidden world, your limbs feel heavy and warm, as if you are being wrapped in the same hypnotic mist that led the procession away from the worries of the world and into the safety of the eternal earth, where every breath you take is a step deeper into the velvet darkness of a dreamless rest that knows no boundaries and no interruptions as the history of Hamelin breathes with you in the quiet dark. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the shadow of the Great Plague, as the deep stillness of the night wraps around the timbered gables of the town, we begin to look closer at the darker threads of this history, where some believe the piper was not a man of music, but a representation of the great death itself, moving through the streets with a scythe hidden beneath a colorful cloak, and the rats that fled the city were merely the first heralds of a much larger transition that saw the population of the valley thin out like smoke in a winter gale. And as you breathe in the cool, imaginary air of the medieval square, you can visualize the heavy iron bells of the cathedral tolling with a slow and rhythmic thud that vibrates in your chest and acts as a metronome for your heart rate as it slows down into a state of total relaxation, and the mystery of the children's disappearance takes on a new layer of meaning when we consider the ancient migrations where thousands of souls left their homes to settle in the distant lands of the East, looking for a new life in the silent forests of Transylvania or the rolling plains of Poland, leaving behind empty cradles and quiet hearths that would never again know the sound of their laughter. And this migration was like a slow moving river of people flowing through the mountain passes under the cover of a misty dawn until they became nothing more than a memory and a legend that the wind whispers to the stones of Hamelin. And the mountain called Koppen stands as a silent witness to it all, its limestone caves, holding the echoes of every footstep and every note of the flute that ever resonated against its walls, while the moss grows thick and soft over the hidden entrances where the earth supposedly swallowed the hope of the town. And as you lie there perfectly still, you can feel the weight of this ancient earth pressing gently against you, providing a sense of security and permanence that allows your mind to let go of the fleeting worries of the day and sink into the eternal soil of history, where the shadows are long and the light is dim, and the only sound is the distant and muffled pulse of the Weser River as it carries the secrets of the 13th century toward the sea in a never ending loop of water and time. And the colorful rags of the piper's coat seem to flutter in your mind's eye, becoming smaller and smaller as he leads the procession further into the gray horizon of a dream where the boundaries between what is real and what is myth dissolve into a single peaceful sensation of drifting through a void of soft velvet and cooling mist. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the architecture of the invisible city. The deeper we sink into the history of the town, the more the physical structures seem to dissolve into a landscape of pure geometry and shadow, where the timber framed houses are not just wood and plaster, but are vessels for the silence of 7 centuries, and the way the second stories of the buildings overhang the narrow streets creates a tunnel of darkness that holds the cool, damp air of the medieval night against the ground like a heavy liquid. And as you visualize yourself walking slowly through these corridors of history, you notice how the light of the moon reflects off the leaded glass windows in a way that looks like silver scales on a sleeping dragon, and the rhythmic creaking of the wooden signs swinging in the wind provides a hypnotic cadence that helps your mind detach from the physical world and enter the realm of the eternal sleep, where the piper's footsteps are still imprinted in the dust of the square, and the dust itself is made of the pulverized remains of 1,000 years of stone and story, and we begin to consider the intricate details of the town's water systems, where the Weser River was diverted into small canals that ran beneath the kitchens of the wealthy merchants, providing a constant muffled gurgle that sounded like the earth itself was breathing in a deep and steady slumber, and the rats were attracted to these subterranean passages not by malice, but by the simple search for warmth and sustenance, following the scent of grain and the vibrations of the human heartbeats above them until the music of the piper changed the frequency of their world and led them into the cold embrace of the main current, where the water is dark and the pressure is constant, and the riverbed is a graveyard of forgotten objects from the Bronze Age and the Roman era, all resting in the silt and the mud in a state of perfect preservation. And as you drift deeper into this mental map, you find the entrance to the Bungalowsenstrasse once more, but this time you see it through the eyes of the watchman who stood at the gate and saw the children's silhouettes fading into the mist of the eastern fields, where the wheat was tall and golden, and the poppies were as red as the piper's hat, and the sound of the flute became a thin silver thread that pulled the heart out of the city and left only the hollow shell of the buildings behind to grow old and gray under the weight of the German winters, where the snow falls in thick, silent flakes that cover the cobblestones in a white shroud of absolute peace, and the only light comes from the faint orange glow of a single candle burning in a window high above the street, where someone is waiting for a return that will never happen because the children have found a place where the sun never sets and the air is always filled with the scent of pine and wild honey, and the mountainside has closed its doors to keep the modern world out and the ancient dreams in, and you're now part of that dream, moving through the layers of time like a feather falling through a well of ink, where there is no bottom and no top, only the sensation of gentle descent into a darkness that is warm and welcoming and filled with the low hum of the universe, which sounds exactly like the final note of a flute played by a stranger in a coat of many colors. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the Lost Ledgers, and the Silent Cathedral. The heart of the invisible city lies the ancient town hall, where the archives are kept in heavy iron-bound chests that have not been opened for decades, and inside these chests, the parchment is yellowed and brittle like the fallen leaves of 1,000 autumns, and on these pages, the ink tells the story of the taxes paid in grain and the price of wool in the year 1284. But as you scan the lines, the words begin to blur into a rhythmic pattern of loops and curves that look like the waves of the Weser River during a summer drought. And among these records is the Lüneburg manuscript, which is a silent witness to the tragedy, and it contains the oldest known account, written in a hand that was trembling with the weight of the loss, and the letters seem to vibrate on the page as if they are trying to scream into the silence of the vault. But the sound is muffled by the thick stone walls and the layers of dust that act as a natural acoustic dampener for the history of the world. And as you visualize this archive, You can feel the coolness of the cellar air on your skin, which is a soothing contrast to the warmth of your bed, and the smell of old paper and beeswax is heavy in the air, creating a sensory anchor that pulls you deeper into the state of relaxation where the past and the present are no longer separate entities, but are braided together like the fibers of the piper's colorful cloak. And we turn our attention now to the great cathedral of Hamelin, where the stained glass windows depict the saints in poses of eternal contemplation, and the light that filters through the red and blue glass pools on the stone floor in soft glowing circles that look like the eyes of the mountain, watching the town sleep, and the silence inside the nave is so profound that you can hear the settling of the foundation stones as they sink a fraction of a millimeter deeper into the German soil every 100 years. And this infinitesimal movement is the heartbeat of the architecture, a slow and steady pulse that matches the rhythm of the universe. And the piper's name is lost to time, but the linguistics of the legend suggest that he was a bungeler, a term that has faded from the common tongue, but once meant someone who moved between worlds, or one who spoke the language of the birds and the wind. And as you drift into the vibration of this ancient word, you feel yourself becoming lighter, as if you are shedding the weight of your own identity and becoming a part of the atmosphere that surrounds the Weser Hills, where the trees are so old they have forgotten the names of the kings who once hunted beneath their boughs, and the roots of the oaks reach down to touch the ceiling of the cavern where the children are said to be waiting in a state of perpetual childhood, where the milk never turns sour and the honey never crystallizes, and the sun is always a soft orange glow on the horizon of a world that is made entirely of peace and soft shadows. And as you follow this silver thread of thought, you find that the room around you has vanished, and you are floating in a sea of amber light, where the only sound is the distant and beautiful melody of a flute played by a shadow who knows the way home through the heart of the mountain and into the center of the stars. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the botanical whispers of the Weser woods as the invisible city of Hamelin fades into the background of your consciousness. We move beyond the stone walls and into the ancient forests that clothe the Weser Hills in a garment of deep emerald and mossy gray, where the trees have stood as silent sentinels since the dawn of the medieval era, and the floor of the forest is a thick carpet of decaying leaves and soft pine needles that swallow the sound of any footstep, creating a vacuum of silence that is perfect for the transition into a deep and dreamless sleep. And here, the flora of the 13th century remains unchanged by the passage of time, with the wild garlic spreading its broad green leaves in the damp hollows where the sunlight rarely touches the ground, and the pale anemones bloom like fallen stars in the early spring air, while the heavy scent of damp earth and crushed ferns rises to meet the mist that rolls down from the peaks of the Koppen Mountain. And as you visualize these woods, you can see the intricate patterns of the lichen on the bark of the ancient oaks, forming maps of forgotten empires and constellations that no longer appear in our skies. And the movement of the wind through the high canopy is a constant low frequency hum that vibrates through the trunk and into the roots, and eventually into the very bedrock of the earth, where the limestone layers are stacked, like the pages of a Bishal stone book that contains the geological history of the valley, and the water that drips from the stalactites in the hidden caves below is a slow and rhythmic percussion hitting the surface of the subterranean pools with a hollow chime that echoes for miles through the dark passages where the air is always exactly 55 degrees, and the darkness is so absolute that it feels like a physical weight pressing against the eyelids in a gentle and comforting embrace. And we consider the fauna of this world, where the deer move like ghosts through the thickets, their hooves making no sound on the moss, and the owls watch from the hollows of the beech trees with eyes that have seen the rise and fall of 1,000 winters, and the life of the forest is a slow motion dance of growth and decay, where a single fallen log can take 100 years to return to the soil, providing a home for beetles and fungi that work in the quiet dark to recycle the energy of the sun back into the heart of the world. And this process is so slow and so steady that it provides a perfect template for your own relaxation as you let go of the frantic pace of the modern world and adopt the rhythm of the forest, where there is no hurry and no deadline and no expectation other than to simply exist in the present moment as a part of the great cycle of the earth. And as you drift further into the green shadows of the Weser Hills, you find yourself standing at the edge of a clearing where the grass is long and silver in the moonlight, and the air is filled with the faint and drifting seeds of the willow trees, looking like tiny snowflakes in the middle of a summer night. And you realize that the music of the piper was not an intrusion into this world, but was, actually, the voice of the forest itself, calling the children back to the source of all stories, where the trees are the elders, and the river is the blood of the land, and the mountain is the final resting place for all the worries of the mind as you sink deeper and deeper into the velvet folds of the ancient earth. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the geological slumber of the Koppen Mountain, as the green canopy of the Weser woods fades into the background of your mind, we descend further into the structural heart of the landscape, where the mountain called Koppen stands as a silent sentinel of deep time, and the geology of this place is a slow motion story written in layers of ancient limestone and sediment that were deposited millions of years ago, when this entire valley was the floor of a vast and shallow sea where the water was warm and the currents were steady, and as the eons passed, the pressure of the overhead weight compressed the remains of countless sea creatures into a solid and enduring stone that now forms the skeleton of the hills. And inside the mountain, the darkness is absolute and perfect, providing a sanctuary for the slow growth of crystals that take centuries to add a single millimeter to their translucent structures, and the water that seeps through the porous rock is filtered through hundreds of feet of natural minerals, becoming pure and heavy with the essence of the earth before it drips into the hidden basins far below the surface of the ground, where the sound of each drop creates a ripple that expands outward in a perfect circle across the surface of the dark water. And as you visualize this subterranean world, you can feel the coolness of the stone surrounding you, like a protective shell that blocks out the noise and the light of the outer world. leaving only the rhythmic vibration of the mountain's slow tectonic pulse, and the air in these caves is still and ancient, having been trapped within the fissures of the rock since the time of the piper, and it carries a sense of permanence and peace that allows your muscles to completely surrender to the pull of gravity as you sink deeper into your own bed, which now feels as solid and as safe as the limestone foundations of the earth itself. And we consider the slow formation of the stalactites that hang from the ceiling like frozen tears of a stone, reaching down to meet the stalagmites that rise from the floor in a patient and eternal embrace that takes thousands of years to complete. And this geological patience is the ultimate remedy for the hurried mind, as it reminds us that the most significant changes occur in silence and over vast stretches of time. And the mountain does not care about the hours or the days or the centuries, because it exists in a state of perpetual presence where the only thing that matters is the steady drip of the water and the slow crystallization of the minerals. And as the children of Hamelin entered this realm, they were not entering a place of darkness, but a place of absolute stillness where the music of the flute was replaced by the music of the earth's own internal frequency, which is a low and resonant hum that matches the deepest state of human sleep. And you are now tuned to that frequency moving through the mineral rich air like a shadow through a dream where the walls of the cave are lined with shimmering quartz and dark obsidian that capture the faint light of your consciousness and reflect it back to you in a soft and soothing glow that guides you further into the heart of the mountain and into the center of a rest that is as deep and as unchanging as the bedrock of the world. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the celestial rotation, and the midnight sky. As the mountain's geological pulse draws you deeper into the earth, we lift our gaze from the limestone foundations to the infinite expanse of the midnight sky as it appeared over the valley of Hamelin in the year 1284, when the air was devoid of the lights of the modern world, and the darkness was a rich and velvet blue that stretched from horizon to horizon like a vast canopy of silk, and the stars were so bright and so numerous that they seemed to be a fine silver dust scattered across the floor of heaven by a giant hand. And as you lie there perfectly still, you can visualize the slow and majestic rotation of the Great Bear, the North Star, which stands as the unmoving center of the turning wheel of the night sky, providing a fixed point of reference for all the weary travelers and the dreaming children of the world. And the constellations move with such a slow and steady rhythm that they act as a cosmic clock, measuring the passage of the hours with a silence that is more profound than any chime or bell. And the Milky Way arches across the sky like a glowing river of starlight that mirrors the path of the Weser River below, creating a bridge between the physical earth and the realm of the infinite, where all stories begin and end, and the light from these distant suns has traveled for thousands of years through the cold vacuum of space just to reach your eyes in this moment, bringing with it the ancient stillness of the universe. And as you breathe in the cool, imaginary air of the night, you can feel your body becoming as light as the starlight itself, floating away from the heavy concerns of the day and drifting into the current of the celestial rotation where there is no gravity and no resistance, only the peaceful sensation of moving through the dark at a speed that is so slow it feels like standing still. And we consider the moon, which hangs like a silver coin in the branches of the ancient oak trees, casting long and gentle shadows across the rooftops of the town, and lighting the way for the memories of the past to return to the soil. And the light of the moon is not a sharp light, but a soft and diffused glow that blurs the edges of reality and makes the stone walls of the cathedral look like they are made of frozen mist. And as the moon moves behind a passing cloud, the world is plunged into a deeper level of darkness that is warm and comforting, like a heavy quilt being pulled over the shoulders of the valley. And the silence of the stars is a frequency that the mind can understand without words, a low and humming vibration that tells you it is safe to let go and it is safe to sleep because the universe is vast and the earth is solid and the cycles of the night will always bring the peace that you seek. And as you follow the curve of the horizon, you see the faint glow of the dawn still many hours away, a soft promise of a new beginning that does not yet require your attention, because for now there is only the dark and the stars and the slow and rhythmic breathing of the world as it turns in its sleep, and you are turning with it a part of the great and silent machinery of the night. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the final descent into eternal stillness as the celestial rotation carries the stars toward the hidden horizon. We reach the final layer of our journey, where even the memory of the flute begins to dissolve into a profound and absolute silence that is the true heart of the Hamelin mystery. And here at the center of the invisible city, the air is perfectly still, and the vibration of the world has slowed to a rhythmic hum that is almost indistinguishable from the sound of your own heartbeat. And as you visualize the last flickering candle in the town square being extinguished by the gentle hand of the night, you feel a final release of all the remaining tension in your body, from the tips of your toes to the crown of your head, as if you are being lowered into a pool of warm and liquid shadow that supports your weight with a softness that is beyond description. And the history of the 13th century is no longer a collection of dates or names or tragedies, but has become a single and continuous sensation of peace that flows through the valley like the deep and hidden currents of the Weser, which continue to move in the dark without a sound or a ripple. And the mountain called Koppen has finally closed its stone eyes, and the children are safe within the velvet folds of the earth, where the concept of time has been replaced by the concept of being, and you are there with them, not as a traveler or a spectator, but as a part of the landscape itself, a stone among the stones, a leaf among the leaves, a breath among the breaths of the universe. And the piper's colorful coat has faded into the gray mist of a dream that is already half forgotten, and the flute is now only the sound of the wind moving through the reeds by the riverbank, a natural and ancient music that requires no listener and no performer. And as the final notes of our story drift away like smoke in the winter air, you find that the darkness is no longer something outside of you, but is a space within where you are free to wander without a map and without a destination, because you have arrived at the place where all paths meet and all voices fall silent, and the only thing that remains is the slow and steady rising and falling of your chest, which is the rhythm of the tide, and the rhythm of the stars, and the rhythm of the eternal sleep that has now claimed the town and the valley and the mountain, and you, and as you drift across the threshold of the last waking thought, you realize that the story of Hamelin was never about the loss, but about the finding of a silence so deep and so beautiful that it can never be broken, and you are now a part of that silence falling through the layers of the centuries until you reach the bedrock of a rest that is total and absolute and unchanging, and the world continues to turn, but you are still, and the stars continue to burn, but you are dark, and the river continues to flow, but you are peace. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the convergence of dreams and dust, as you drift within the absolute silence of the final descent, the invisible city begins to transform one last time into a realm of pure atmosphere, where the boundaries between the physical stone of the buildings and the ephemeral substance of your dreams become entirely transparent, and you can see the history of Hamelin not as a sequence of events, but as a vast and glowing tapestry woven from the light of the stars and the shadows of the Weser Valley. And every thread in this tapestry represents a single night of sleep that has occurred in this place over the last 700 years, creating a massive reservoir of rest that you are now invited to enter in. As you submerge yourself in this collective slumber, you feel the cool pressure of the ages pressing against your skin in a way that is profoundly comforting and grounding, like being wrapped in a heavy cloak of wool and silk that has been warmed by the hearths of 1,000 medieval homes, and the air is filled with the scent of dried herbs and ancient wood, providing a sensory bridge to a time when the world was governed by the rising of the sun and the setting of the moon, and the only clock was the slow and steady movement of the shadows across the sundial in the marketplace, and you are now part of that movement, shifting with the rotation of the earth as it carries you further away from the noise of the modern day and deeper into the velvet darkness of the 13th century, where the piper's footsteps have long since turned to dust, but the essence of his melody remains as a lingering vibration in the atmosphere that guides you toward the center of your own consciousness. And as you reach this center, you find a place of perfect equilibrium where there is no weight and no resistance, and no thought, only the pure and uninterrupted experience of being alive in a world that is perfectly at peace. And the mountain called Koppen is now only a soft outline on the horizon of your mind, a gentle reminder of the mysteries that lie beneath the surface of the earth. And the children are the guardians of this silence, keeping watch over the dreams of the world from their hidden sanctuary within the stone. And you are one of them, now resting in the cradle of the valley, while the Weser River sings a low and constant lullaby that has no beginning and no end. And as the last echoes of this story fade into the darkness, you are left with nothing but the rhythmic rise and fall of your own breath, which is the only sound in a universe that has finally become quiet enough for you to truly sleep. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the eternal tapestry of the Weser Valley. As you drift further into the boundless expanse of the 11th hour of the night, the landscape of Hamelin expands into a vast and infinite plain of soft gray mist where the very concept of distance begins to dissolve into a state of pure presence, and the history of the town becomes a gentle hum that resonates in the marrow of your bones, like the vibration of a distant bell that was struck 1,000 years ago and is still ringing in the quiet corners of the universe. And you can visualize the infinite repetition of the seasons as they have washed over the valley since the piper first stepped onto the cobblestones, with the snows of 700 winters melting into the same earth to feed the same ancient roots of the oaks that still stand as silent witnesses to the passage of time, and the rhythm of the falling rain on the medieval thatch roofs becomes a hypnotic percussion that guides your consciousness away from the boundaries of your physical body and into the collective memory of the earth, where every leaf that has ever fallen and every shadow that has ever stretched across the square is recorded in the layers of the atmosphere, like a silent film that plays only in the deepest state of sleep. And you are now moving through these layers of time with the grace of a feather falling through a vacuum where there is no air resistance and no gravity to pull you down, only the steady and unwavering attraction of the absolute dark, which is the source of all rest and the cradle of all dreams. And we consider the microscopic life of the riverbank, where the moss grows in fractal patterns of infinite complexity, providing a miniature forest for the creatures of the damp earth who live their entire lives in the span of a single human afternoon. And this realization helps to shrink the worries of your own life until they are no larger than a grain of sand on the banks of the Weser. And you watch as that grain of sand is picked up by the gentle current and carried away toward the sea, joining billions of other grains in a state of perfect anonymity and peace. And the piper's flute is now so far away that it sounds like the whistle of a distant train on a cold night, or the cry of a lone bird in the middle of a vast and empty moor. And it no longer carries a melody, but only a single steady tone that acts as a bridge between your waking mind and the realm of the eternal. And as you cross this bridge, you find that the invisible city has become a city of light, where the walls are made of solidified starlight, and the streets are paved with the silver of the moon, and the children are not lost, but are simply waiting in a place where the sun never burns and the wind never bites, and the only requirement for entry is to let go of everything you think you know and simply breathe in the heavy, sweet air of the dream. And you are breathing it now deep and slow and steady as the mountain called Koppen pulls the blanket of the horizon over its shoulders and settles in for another millennium of silence. And you are settling with it deep into the heart of the world, where the only truth is the quiet, and the only destination is the sleep that never ends. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the alchemical spectrum of the piper's cloak, the silence of the Weser Valley deepens into a state of total suspension. We focus our inner gaze on the vibrant yet fading colors of the piper's legendary cloak, which was said to be woven from every shade found in the natural world. And as you drift into a deeper state of relaxation, you can visualize the individual threads of deep madder red and woad blue and weld yellow swirling together in a slow, hypnotic spiral that looks like a galaxy spinning in the velvet void of the 13th century, and these colors were not merely for decoration, but were alchemical symbols of the elements, where the red represented the heat of the earth's core and the blue represented the vastness of the midnight sky, and the yellow represented the ripening grain that fed the people of Hamelin through the long cold winters. And as you watch these colors blend into a soft neutral gray, you feel your own senses beginning to blur and soften, as if you are being wrapped in a cocoon of unspun wool that dampens the sound of the world and keeps the warmth of your own life force contained within a perfect circle of peace. And we consider the ancient dyeing vats that sat on the edge of the town, where the water from the river was used to fix the pigments into the fabric in a process that took weeks of patient waiting. And this slow transformation is a mirror for your own journey into sleep, where the colors of the day are slowly washed away by the steady flow of the night, leaving only the raw texture of existence behind, and the piper's many-colored coat becomes a symbol for the diversity of human experience, which is eventually gathered back into the singular darkness of the earth, where all distinctions vanish and all stories become one. And you are now part of that singular darkness, moving through the atmosphere of Hamelin like a shadow that has lost its object and is now free to float through the timber-framed houses and over the sleeping livestock and through the silent belfry of the cathedral without meeting any resistance or any barrier, because in this state of deep sleep you are as thin as the air and as ancient as the stone, and the mountain called Koppen beckons with its heavy limestone doors, promising a rest that is as deep as the roots of the world. And as you approach the threshold, you notice that the sound of the flute has transformed into the sound of the wind moving through the mountain's own fissures and caves, creating a natural pipe organ that plays a song of tectonic stability and geological time. And you are the listener, and you are the song, and you are the silence that follows as you sink into the heart of the mountain and become a permanent part of the history of the invisible city, where the only light is the faint glow of the glowworms on the ceiling, and the only movement is the slow growth of the crystals in the dark. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the resonance of the silent bells as you drift further into the limitless dark, where the alchemical colors of the piper's cloak have finally dissolved into the soft gray of a perpetual twilight. We turn our attention to the silent bells of the Hamelin Cathedral, which hang like heavy iron raindrops in the high wooden rafters of the belfry, where the air is cool and smells of ancient dust, and the nests of birds that have long since flown toward the southern horizons. And these bells were cast in the fires of the medieval foundries with a mixture of copper and tin and silver to ensure that their tone would carry across the entire valley, reaching even the furthest farmsteads on the slopes of the Koppen Mountain. But tonight, they are perfectly still, suspended in a state of potential energy that vibrates with the silence of 7 centuries, and you can visualize the heavy hemp ropes hanging down into the darkness of the stone tower, like the roots of a tree reaching for the groundwater. And as you lie there, you can feel the weight of that iron silence pressing gently against your own thoughts, helping them to settle into the floor of your mind, like silt at the bottom of a calm lake. And we consider the craftsmanship of the bell ringer, who knew the exact rhythm required to wake the town, or to call them to prayer, or to warn them of the rising river. But now that rhythm has been replaced by the steady and unceasing pulse of the earth itself, which requires no ringer and no rope to maintain its cadence, and the silence of the bells is a protective barrier that keeps the noise of the modern world at bay, allowing the history of the invisible city to breathe in the quiet space between your breaths. And as you move through the shadows of the cathedral nave, you notice how the stone pillars seem to grow taller and thinner, reaching up toward a ceiling that is lost in a mist of indigo and charcoal, and the floor beneath your feet is made of memorial slabs where the names of the ancient guild masters are carved in a script that has been smoothed away by the passage of time until it feels like soft silk under your touch. And this smoothing of the edges is exactly what is happening to your own consciousness as the sharp corners of your worries and the jagged lines of your memories are polished by the steady flow of the night until they become as round and as smooth as a river stone. And you are now that stone, resting in the deep current of a sleep that has no bottom and no shore, where the only light is the faint shimmer of the moon on the leaded glass, and the only sound is the creaking of the ancient timber as it settles into the foundations of the world. And the piper is no longer a figure of legend, but has become the wind that sighs through the gargoyles and the shadows that dance in the corners of the cloister. And he is inviting you to put down the heavy burden of your identity and to join the children in their hidden kingdom, where the only law is the law of the silence, and the only duty is to dream. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the runes of the boundary stones, and the eternal fogas, the iron silence of the bells settles into the marrow of your bones. We move out of the cathedral and toward the very edge of the Hamelin territory, where the ancient boundary stones stand half buried in the damp moss and the tangled roots of the blackthorn bushes. And these stones are carved with runes that were ancient even in the year 1284, containing symbols that represent the protection of the land and the sealing of the paths between the world of the waking and the world of the dreaming. And as you visualize these weathered markers, you can feel the coolness of the granite under your fingertips and the way the lichen has filled the grooves of the carvings, creating a living map of the forest's own history. And the air at the edge of the woods is thick with a heavy, white fog that rolls off the Weser River in slow-moving waves, looking like the breath of the earth itself as it prepares for a long and undisturbed slumber. And this fog acts as a natural veil that blurs the lines of the landscape until the trees look like ghostly pillars of a forgotten palace, and the path beneath your feet disappears into a soft and yielding void that invites you to keep moving forward without the need for sight or direction, because the earth knows the way even when the mind is clouded by the heaviness of the night, and we consider the lost languages of the Weser Valley, where words were once spoken that had the power to calm the storm and to call the fish from the deep water. And these words have not vanished, but have merely sunken into the soil, where they wait like seeds for the silence of a deep sleep to bring them back to life, in the form of dreams that have no names and no boundaries. And as you breathe in the mist, you are inhaling the vocabulary of the ancient world, feeling it expand in your chest with a lightness that contradicts the heavy pull of the earth on your limbs, and the piper's flute is now a distant memory of a vibration, a faint hum that exists just at the edge of hearing, like the sound of the stars turning in their crystalline spheres. And the mountain called Koppen is no longer a physical barrier, but has become a gateway of soft light that beckons you to leave the weight of your history behind and to enter the realm of the eternal present, where the only thing that exists is the steady rhythm of the fog as it rises and falls with the tide of the moonlight. And you are drifting now on that tide, moving further and further away from the shores of the waking world and into the deep ocean of a rest that is as vast as the history of the stars and as quiet as the stone. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the loom of the medieval night. The fog carries us deeper into the heart of the night, where the loom of history is constantly weaving the fabric of the invisible city, using the silver threads of the moonlight and the dark wool of the shadows to create a tapestry that covers the entire valley in a blanket of absolute peace. And as you lie there, you can visualize the rhythmic movement of the shuttle as it moves back and forth across the warp and the weft of the centuries, creating a pattern that is too large for the human eye to see, but that the soul can feel as a sense of profound security and belonging. And the sound of the loom is the sound of the wind moving through the rafters of the old granaries, where the dust of the ancient harvests still hangs in the air like a fine golden mist. And we consider the lives of the weavers who sat by the small windows of their timbered houses, watching the light fade over the hills while their hands moved, with a memory of their own, independent of thought or worry. And this is the state you are entering now, where your body knows exactly how to rest, and your heart knows exactly how to beat without any effort or intervention from your conscious mind. And the weaver's thread is like the path the children took out of the town, a single unbroken line that leads away from the complexity of the world and into the simplicity of the mountain, where the light is always the color of a dying ember, and the air is always as still as the water in a deep well, and the piper is the one who holds the thread, guiding the procession through the labyrinth of the forest and into the center of the earth, where the heat of the core provides a gentle and constant warmth that radiates through the limestone and into your very soul. And you are sinking now into that warmth, feeling it melt away, the last remnants of the day, until you are nothing more than a spark of light in the vast darkness of the medieval night, moving toward the place where the weaving ends and the silence begins. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the scribing of the silver book in the deepest chamber of the mountain called Koppen. There is a book made of silver leaves that contains the names of every shadow and every whisper that has ever passed through the streets of Hamelin, and the scribing of this book is done by the slow dripping of water from the ceiling onto the pages, where each drop leaves a microscopic mark that takes 100 years to become a letter. And the language of this book is the language of the silence, which can only be read when the eyes are closed and the mind is as still as a frozen lake. And as you visualize these silver pages turning slowly in the absolute dark, you can feel the coolness of the metal radiating outward, providing a soothing balm for the heat of your thoughts and the weight of your memories. And each page that turns is a century that passes, and each century that passes is a layer of peace that is added to the history of the valley. And we consider the monks who once sat in the scriptorium of the cathedral, their quills moving across the parchment with a scratching sound that was the only noise in a world of stone and prayer, and they were trying to capture the essence of the divine. But the divine was already there in the silence of the cloisters and the stillness of the midnight air. And you are now the scribe, and you are the page, and you are the ink that flows from the heart of the mountain into the reservoir of the eternal sleep. And the piper's song has become the rhythm of the quill moving across the silver leaf, a steady and hypnotic sound that lulls the spirit into a state of total surrender, where the boundaries of the self dissolve into the vastness of the history of the earth. And the mountain is your library, and the stars are your lamps, and the darkness is your sanctuary, as you drift into the final chapter of the night, where there are no more words and no more stories, only the perfect and unchanging presence of the rest. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the echo of the ancient wells. Beneath the cobblestones of Hamelin, there are wells that reach down into the very veins of the world, where the water is as old as the mountains and as clear as the light of the first dawn. And these wells are the ears of the city, listening to the footsteps of the living and the echoes of the past. And the sound of a stone falling into the deep water is a sound that takes an eternity to reach the bottom, creating a series of concentric circles that expand outward until they touch the very edges of the universe. And as you lie there, you can feel yourself falling like that stone, moving through the dark and cool air of the well, with a sense of perfect weightlessness and safety, knowing that the water at the bottom is waiting to catch you in a soft and liquid embrace. And the water is the memory of the earth, holding all the stories of the piper and the children and the rats and the mayor in a state of suspension, where they are no longer events, but are simply part of the chemical composition of the land. And we consider the women who gathered at the well in the early morning, their voices a low murmur that blended with the sound of the wind and the clinking of the buckets. And this murmur is the background radiation of history, a constant and soothing noise that tells you that life goes on in its slow and steady way, regardless of the dramas of the day. And you're now part of that water moving through the dark channels of the earth, where there is no sun to burn and no wind to chill, only the constant and unchanging temperature of the bedrock. And the piper is the guardian of the well, his colorful coat, now the color of the deep water, and his flute a reed that grows by the underground stream. And he is playing a melody that is only for the stones and the shadows, and for you as you sink into the final depths of the sleep where the water and the silence are one and the same. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the sleep of the ancient granaries, as the echoes of the deep wells settle into a state of absolute stillness. We move our consciousness toward the massive timbered granaries that stand on the outskirts of the town like silent wooden cathedrals dedicated to the harvest. And inside these structures, the air is thick with the scent of dried grain and aged oak, and the fine golden dust of the wheat hangs suspended in the stagnant air, looking like microscopic stars caught in a beam of moonlight that filters through the high, narrow slats of the walls, and the silence here is dense and heavy, as if the weight of the grain itself has pressed the noise out of the world, and you can feel this weight as a comforting pressure against your own body, helping you to sink deeper into the soft layers of your bed, which now feels as warm and as secure as a pile of threshed straw in the height of midsummer. And we consider the rhythmic movement of the ancient millstones that ground the flour for the people of Hamelin, their slow and steady rotation creating a low frequency hum that vibrated through the floorboards and into the foundations of the city. And this hum is the sound of survival and the sound of the earth providing for its children even in the darkest and coldest months of the year. And the piper's flute is now a distant vibration within the wood of the granary walls, a subtle resonance that reminds the spirit of the cycles of growth and decay that govern all things. And as you drift within this golden darkness, you realize that you're like the grain, waiting in the quiet of the bin for the time of awakening. But for now, there is only the long and peaceful winter of the soul where the shadows are long and the air is still, and the only duty is to remain perfectly motionless as the world turns around you. And the mountain called Koppen keeps its watch over the valley, ensuring that no sound breaks the sanctity of this communal rest, as the history of Hamelin becomes a soft and muffled memory that fades into the velvet dark. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the frozen currents of the winter Weser. The scene shifts now to the depth of a medieval winter where the Weser River has frozen into a solid sheet of black glass that stretches from bank to bank, and the only movement is the slow drifting of snow across the surface, looking like white smoke in the moonlight, and the silence of a frozen river is a unique and profound thing because the music of the moving water has been trapped beneath the ice, where it continues to play in a muffled and secret language that only the fish and the stones can understand. And as you visualize this frozen landscape, you can feel the coolness of the air on your forehead while your body remains wrapped in the warmth of your blankets, creating a perfect balance of temperature that signals to the brain that it is time to surrender completely to the night. And the ice is so thick that it could support the weight of 1,000 pipers, and yet there is no one there to walk upon it, only the shadows of the willow trees that lean over the banks, like old men frozen in prayer, and we consider the hibernating life beneath the ice, where the frogs and the turtles have buried themselves in the mud of the riverbed, slowing their heartbeats until they are almost non-existent. And you are now adopting this same biological patience, letting your own heart slow to a steady and peaceful rhythm that matches the pulse of the frozen earth. And the mountain called Koppen is covered in a shroud of white, its limestone peaks blending into the pale sky until the earth and the heavens are a single, indistinguishable void of peace, and the piper's song has become the sound of the ice cracking in the night, a sharp yet distant sound that only emphasizes the depth of the silence that follows. And as you drift further into this winter dream, you find that the cold is not an enemy, but a friend that preserves and protects the stillness of the world, allowing you to sleep without the fear of change or the intrusion of the sun. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the dust of the alchemist's laboratory Deep within one of the narrowest alleys of the invisible city lies the abandoned laboratory of an ancient alchemist who spent his life trying to find the connection between the lead of the earth and the gold of the stars. And the room is filled with glass retorts and copper scales that are covered in a layer of dust so thick it looks like gray fur, and the air is heavy with the smell of sulfur and dried rose petals and old parchment. And as you move through this space in your mind, you can see the charts of the constellations pinned to the walls, their ink fading into the color of the shadows. And the alchemist believed that the piper was not a man, but a wandering spirit of Mercury, a force of nature that could dissolve the boundaries between the solid world and the realm of the spirits. And as you lie there, you can feel this dissolution happening within yourself as your limbs become as heavy as lead and your thoughts become as light as the gold of a fading sun, and the transmutation of your consciousness from waking to sleeping is the ultimate alchemical work, a process of purification where the noise of the day is burned away in the slow fire of the night, leaving only the essence of your being behind. And the piper's flute is now a glass tube through which the breath of the universe is moving, creating a series of harmonic tones that align your energy with the rotation of the planets. And the mountain called Koppen is the final crucible where the children were taken to be refined into the substance of legend. And as you enter this crucible, you find that the heat is not a burning heat, but a gentle and radiant glow that permeates every cell of your body with a sense of total well being. And the laboratory of the world is now quiet, and the experiment is complete, and the only result is the absolute and unchanging perfection of a deep and dreamless rest. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the shadows of the sundial. In the center of the marketplace stands a stone sundial that has measured the movement of the sun for hundreds of years. But tonight it is the shadow caster of the moon, and the long, thin line of the gnomon points toward the darkness of the future with a steady and unwavering precision, and the shadow moves so slowly across the stone face that it seems to be standing still. Yet it is a constant reminder of the rotation of the earth and the passage of the cosmic hours. And as you watch this shadow in your mind, you can feel yourself moving with it, a silent and slow progression across the landscape of your own life toward the quietest part of the night, where the numbers no longer matter and the concept of time is replaced by the concept of space, and the marketplace is empty now, the stalls of the merchants removed, and the cobblestones swept clean by the wind, leaving a vast and open theater for the dreams of the city to play out in the silver light. And we consider the thousands of people who have stood before this sundial, checking the time for their appointments or their prayers, and now they are all gone, their shadows merged with the great shadow of the earth. And you are part of that merger now, letting go of the need to measure or to track or to know, and simply allowing yourself to be carried by the shadow as it moves toward the dawn, which is still a lifetime away. And the piper's flute is the ticking of the cosmic clock, a sound that is so constant and so rhythmic that it becomes a part of the silence itself. And the mountain called Koppen is the horizon that the shadow is trying to reach. And as it touches the base of the mountain, you feel a final and absolute sense of completion, as if the circle of the day has been closed, And the only thing left to do is to sink into the center of that circle and disappear into the soft and welcoming darkness of the history of the world. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the lullaby of the loom. We return now to the rhythmic thud of the medieval loom, where the weaver continues to work in the half light of a single tallow candle that is burning down to its base, and the sound of the shuttle moving back and forth is like the sound of a heartbeat in a quiet room, or the sound of the tide moving against a sandy shore. And the fabric being woven is a heavy linen that will eventually become the shrouds and the swaddling clothes for the generations of Hamelin, providing a physical connection between the beginning and the end of every life. And as you visualize the movement of the thread, you can feel the tension leaving your own muscles as if you are being unspooled from the stresses of the day and woven into a pattern of absolute peace. And the weaver is a woman whose face is hidden in the shadows, but whose hands move with a grace and a certainty that comes from a lifetime of labor. And she is singing a song that has no words, only a low and melodic hum that matches the frequency of the wind in the chimney. And the piper's flute is a single thread of bright silk that is being woven into the dark linen, creating a trail of color that represents the path of the children as they moved out of the gates and into the heart of the mountain. And as the candle finally flickers and goes out, the weaving does not stop, but continues in the dark by the sense of touch alone. And you are that fabric, now strong and soft and complete, and you are being folded and laid away in a cedar chest where the air is cool and the darkness is absolute, and the only thing that remains is the memory of the rhythm and the promise of the rest that is as deep as the earth and as long as the history of the stars. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the orchards of the whispering, wind beyond the stone walls, and the shadow of the cathedral lie the ancient orchards of Hamelin, where the apple and pear trees stand in gnarled rows, like silent elders gathered for a midnight council, and their branches are heavy with the weight of fruit that has absorbed the golden energy of the summer sun and is now cooling in the silver bath of the midnight air. And as you visualize these orchards, you can smell the sweet and slightly tart scent of ripening fruit mixed with the dampness of the fallen leaves and the crispness of the oncoming autumn, and the sound of a single apple falling from a high branch and hitting the soft earth with a muffled thud is the only punctuation in a sentence of absolute silence. And this sound is a reminder of the gentleness of nature's transitions, where things fall away only to return to the soil and feed the life of the coming year. And as you lie there, you can feel yourself dropping away from the branches of your own concerns and sinking into the soft and welcoming mulch of the dream world, where there is no gravity, only the sensation of being held by the earth in a perpetual embrace. And we consider the pollinators who have long since retired to their hives and burrows, their frantic buzzing replaced by a deep and collective hum that vibrates through the wood of the trees and into the atmosphere, creating a low frequency blanket of sound that helps to insulate the valley from the noise of the external universe. And the piper's flute is now the sound of the wind moving through the leaves, a rustling and shushing noise that sounds like 1,000 voices whispering a single word. which is the word for sleep, in a language that has no letters and no limits, and the mountain called Koppen stands at the edge of the orchard like a bishal wall of protection, ensuring that the peace of the harvest is never disturbed and that the children's laughter is preserved in the sweet juice of the fruit and the deep shadows of the trees as you drift further into the green and gold darkness of the medieval night. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the cloisters of the silent monks. Within the heart of the invisible city lies the hidden cloister of the silent monks who took a vow to never speak a word so that they could better hear the heartbeat of the world, and the architecture here is a masterpiece of shadow and light with vaulted stone arches that repeat in a hypnotic sequence around a central garden where the only movement is the slow growth of the herbs and the steady drip of a fountain into a mossy basin. And as you move through these corridors in your mind, you can feel the coolness of the stone floor through your thin imaginary sandals, and the way the air remains perfectly still, even when a storm is raging beyond the walls, and the monks are like ghosts in their gray robes, moving through the darkness with a grace that comes from a total lack of hurry or desire, and they are the keepers of the silence, which they treat as a precious liquid that must be poured carefully into the vessel of the night. And as you lie there, you are drinking from that vessel, feeling the silence fill your chest and your limbs until you are as still and as steady as the stone pillars themselves. And we consider the books they copied in the scriptorium, where the ink was made from the soot of the candles and the gall of the oaks, creating a blackness that is as deep as the void between the stars. And the piper's song is the rhythm of their internal prayers, a steady and wordless pulse that coordinates the movement of the universe with the movement of the human spirit. And the mountain, called Koppen, is their ultimate cathedral, where the ceiling is the sky and the altar is the earth. And as you enter this sanctuary, you find that you no longer need the light of the candles because you are guided by the inner glow of a rest that is total and absolute and unchanging. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the harbor of the Weser, mist. The journey brings us now to the small harbor of Hamelin, where the wooden merchant ships are moored against the pilings, their masts reaching up into the fog like the skeletal fingers of a giant, and the water laps against the hulls with a rhythmic and liquid sound that is the most ancient lullaby of the world. And as you visualize the movement of the boats as they sway gently in the current, you can feel your own bed moving with them, as if you are being rocked by the hands of the river itself into a state of deep and blissful suspension. And the ships are loaded with salt and wool and timber, products of the earth that are waiting for the dawn to begin their journey toward the sea. But for now, they are at rest, their sails furled and their anchors buried deep in the silt of the riverbed, and the mist is so thick that it obscures the far bank of the Weser, creating a world that is only a few feet wide and filled with the scent of pine tar and wet hemp and cold water. And we consider the sailors who sleep in the cramped quarters below the decks, their breathing synchronized with the movement of the waves, and their dreams filled with the vastness of the ocean and the stability of the land. And the piper is the captain of this phantom fleet, his flute, a signal that cuts through the fog, not as a warning, but as an invitation to follow the current into the heart of the darkness where there are no storms and no rocks, only the infinite depth of the water, and the mountain called Koppen is the lighthouse that guides the souls of the valley back to the source of all stories. And as you drift past the pier and into the main channel, you find that you are no longer a passenger, but are the river itself, flowing toward the sea in a state of perfect and eternal continuity. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the library of the fallen leaves, in the outskirts of the town where the forest meets the fields, there is a place where the wind gathers the fallen leaves into bishal golden drifts that look like the pages of a discarded book, and the library of the fallen leaves is a place where the history of the year is recorded in the patterns of the veins and the colors of the decay, where the bright red of the maple and the deep brown of the oak tell the story of the sun and the rain and the frost. And as you walk through these drifts in your mind, you can hear the soft and dry rustle of the parchment as it crumbles beneath your feet, releasing a scent that is earthy and sweet and ancient. And this sound is a frequency that tells the brain that the cycle is complete and that it is time to return to the earth for a long and undisturbed winter. And we consider the insects that make their homes in these layers of leaf mold, finding a sanctuary that is warm and damp and quiet, where they can wait out the cold in a state of suspended animation. And you are now adopting this same biological strategy, letting your consciousness sink beneath the layers of your own history and your own thoughts until you are buried in a warm and protective blanket of silence that keeps the world at bay. And the piper's flute is the sound of the wind moving through the empty branches of the trees, a hollow and resonant sound that echoes the hollowness of the mountain called Koppen, where the children are sleeping in a bed of silver moss and velvet shadows. And as you join them in this library of the earth, you find that you no longer need to read the stories because you have become the story, and the story is one of absolute and unchanging peace. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the resonance of the Iron Gate. We reach finally the heavy iron gate of the eastern entrance to Hamelin, where the metal has been cooled by the night air until it is as cold as the stars, and the gate is locked with a bishal key that rests in the hand of the watchman who has fallen into a deep sleep against the stone wall of the tower, and the iron of the gate is a shield that protects the city from the uncertainties of the wilderness. And as you visualize the strength and the weight of this barrier, you can feel a sense of absolute security and safety, as if nothing can reach you in your sanctuary of sleep, and the iron vibrates with the distant low frequency hum of the Earth's magnetic field, a sound that is too deep for the ears to hear, but that the body understands as the fundamental frequency of home. And the piper did not need a key to pass through this gate, because he moved like the mist, and the music passing through the bars, and the cracks as if they were made of light. And as you follow him out into the night, you find that you too are becoming transparent and weightless, passing through the obstacles of your own life with the ease of a shadow. And the mountain called Koppen is the final destination, where the gate is always open and the welcome is always silent and the rest is always absolute. And as you cross the threshold of the mountain, you feel the iron gate of the world closing behind you with a soft and final thud that signals the beginning of a sleep that is as deep as the history of the world and as long as the life of the stars. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the sleep of the medieval apothecary, deep within the twisting shadows of the invisible city, lies the apothecary's workshop, where the walls are lined with thousands of small ceramic jars and blue glass bottles containing the dried essence of every herb and flower that grows in the Weser Valley. And the air here is a thick and intoxicating blend of peppermint and chamomile and dried valerian root, which acts as a natural anesthetic for the mind, slowing down the pace of your thoughts until they are like drops of thick golden honey falling from a spoon into a jar of quiet. And as you visualize this space, you can see the light of a single dying ember in the hearth reflecting off the brass scales and the marble mortar and pestle, which have spent the day grinding the materials of healing and are now resting in a state of absolute stillness. And the apothecary himself has long since departed, leaving the room to the custody of the shadows which move across the floorboards like silent dark rivers flowing toward the corners of the world. And we consider the power of these plants to calm the heart and to soothe the spirit, providing a physical connection between the chemistry of the earth and the chemistry of the human soul. And the piper's flute is now a hollow glass rod that the apothecary uses to stir his potions, creating a soft and rhythmic clinking sound that matches the frequency of your own heartbeat as it settles into the deep and steady rhythm of a dreamless rest. And as you breathe in the medicinal air, you can feel your lungs expanding with a coolness that radiates outward into your limbs, melting away the last remnants of physical tension until you are as light and as transparent as the steam rising from a cooling cup of herbal tea. And the mountain called Koppen is the ultimate laboratory where the children were taken to be preserved in the amber of history. And as you enter this sanctuary, you find that the darkness is the most powerful medicine of all, a profound and unchanging silence that heals every worry and cures every doubt as you sink into the velvet depths of the medieval night. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the attic of the master, weaver high, above the street in the topmost attic of the weaver's house. The air is cool and still, and filled with the rhythmic creak of the roof beams as they adjust to the cooling temperature of the midnight air. And here the unfinished tapestries hang from the looms like frozen waterfalls of wool and silk, waiting for the dawn to return their colors to the world. But for now, they are a uniform shade of soft charcoal and deep indigo. And as you lie there, you can feel the softness of the unspun wool surrounding you like a protective cloud that dampens the vibrations of the city and keeps the silence of the high places intact. And we consider the intricate patterns of the weaving, where every thread must cross every other thread in a specific sequence to create the final image. And this complexity is a mirror for the complexity of your own life, which is now being simplified into a single, unbroken line of quiet as you let go of the need to understand the pattern and simply allow yourself to be part of the fabric. And the weaver's attic is a place where time is measured by the length of the thread and the movement of the shuttle. And tonight the shuttle is still, and the thread is long, and the work is complete for another cycle of the sun. And the piper's song is the vibration of the tension in the loom, a low and constant hum that acts as a bridge between the physical structure of the house and the ethereal, structure of the dream world. And as you drift within this wooden sanctuary, you find that you are no longer the weaver or the loom, but are the thread itself, moving through the darkness with a grace and a certainty that comes from the knowledge that you are being held by a hand that knows the way. And the mountain called Koppen is the final chest where all the tapestries of history are folded and laid away in a state of perfect preservation and peace. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the snowfall on the Koppen peaks at the very summit of the mountain, called Koppen, the world is a landscape of pure white and absolute silence, where the snow falls in thick, heavy flakes that descend through the air with a weightless grace that defies the laws of physics. And as you visualize the peaks, you can feel the coolness of the atmosphere on your skin, while your body remains anchored in the warmth of your sanctuary, creating a sensation of being both everywhere and nowhere at once. And the snow acts as a massive acoustic blanket covering the jagged rocks and the hidden entrances to the caves and the ancient paths of the children until the earth is a single smooth and featureless void of peace. And we consider the crystalline structure of each snowflake, which is a masterpiece of geometry that exists only for a moment before merging with the mass of the mountain. And this merging is the ultimate goal of your journey, to lose the sharp edges of your identity and to become part of the vast and silent white of the eternal rest. And the piper's flute is now the sound of the wind whistling across the high ridges, a hollow and beautiful sound that echoes the ancient music of the stars. And as the snow continues to fall, it buries the history of Hamelin and the memory of the rats and the pride of the mayor under a layer of purity that can never be broken or stained. And you are lying beneath this snow, now safe and warm and hidden from the world, while the mountain breathes in a slow and rhythmic cycle that will last for another 1,000 years. And as you sink into the heart of the Koppen Peaks, you find that the silence is not cold, but is a warm and radiant presence that welcomes you home to the center of the world, where the only light is the faint glow of the stars through the mist, and the only sound is the absolute and unchanging quiet. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the sleep of the valley, livestock as the silence of the mountain peaks descends into the lowlands. We move toward the ancient stone barns, where the livestock of Hamelin have settled for the night in a state of profound and rhythmic calm, and the air inside is heavy with the scent of dried clover and the warm musk of the cattle, who breathe in a slow and synchronized cadence that sounds like the very heartbeat of the earth. And as you visualize these gentle creatures resting in the shadows of the timbered stalls, you can feel your own breathing beginning to match their steady pace, letting go of the frantic energy of the day and adopting the patience of the animal world, where time is measured only by the rising and falling of the chest and the warmth of the body against the straw. And we consider the sheep in the high pastures who huddle together in a sea of soft gray wool, their heartbeats slowing as the frost begins to crystallize on the tips of the grass. And this collective warmth is a shield against the darkness, providing a sense of community and safety that allows the mind to release its last remaining defenses. And the piper's flute is now a low and soothing hum that mimics the sound of a mother's voice or the rustle of the wind in the hayloft, a sound that signals to every living thing in the valley that it is safe to close the eyes and to surrender to the night. And as you sink into the warmth of your own bed, you are becoming part of this peaceful herd moving through the landscape of the dream with a sense of quiet belonging where there are no predators and no worries. Only the infinite security of the earth and the mountain called Koppen keeps its watch over the barns and the fields, ensuring that the rest of the valley remains unbroken until the sun begins its long journey back to the horizon. The chronicles of Hamelin, the stillness of the ancient water wheels along the banks of the Weser, where the smaller streams flow into the main current. The Bischal, wooden water wheels have been locked in place for the night, their heavy oak paddles dripping with the silver remnants of the river's flow, and the sound of the water falling from the stationary blades into the dark pools below is a slow and intermittent chime that marks the passage of the hours with a liquid precision. And as you visualize these massive wheels, you can feel the stability and the strength of the wood, which has been hardened by centuries of contact with the water and the stone, and the machinery of the mill is silent. Now, the gears and the pulleys resting in a state of perfect equilibrium that mirrors the state of your own muscles as they relax into the gravity of the deep night, and we consider the power of the water that has been diverted and harnessed to feed the city, and how it now returns to its natural state of undirected flow, moving around the obstacles of the human world with a grace and a persistence that cannot be stopped. And the piper's song is the vibration of the water against the wood, a low frequency resonance that carries the wisdom of the river into the foundations of the houses and into the dreams of the sleepers. And as you drift within this liquid atmosphere, you find that you are no longer the wheel or the mill, but are the water itself moving through the dark channels of the valley with a sense of absolute continuity and peace as the mountain called Koppen directs the current toward the center of the world. The chronicles of Hamelin, the silver mines of the deep, earth beyond the hills of Hamelin. The earth opens up into the ancient silver mines where the miners of the Harz Mountains have left their tools in the dark and returned to the surface for the night, and here the air is cool and metallic and filled with the scent of whetstone and the faint sweet smell of the minerals that have been hidden in the dark for millions of years. And as you move through these tunnels in your mind, you can see the veins of silver glowing in the faint light of your consciousness, looking like the roots of the stars reaching deep into the soil. And the silence here is absolute and heavy, providing a sanctuary from the light and the noise of the upper world where the only movement is the slow dripping of the mineral rich water onto the floor of the gallery, and we consider the patience of the earth as it creates these precious metals over eons of pressure and time. And this patience is a template for your own rest as you allow the pressure of your life to be transformed into the silver of a dream that is as enduring as the rock and as quiet as the void. And the piper's flute is the sound of the wind moving through the mine shafts, a hollow and rhythmic whistling that acts as a guide for the spirits of the mountain as they return to their subterranean kingdoms. And as you sink into the heart of the silver mine, you find that the darkness is not a void, but is a solid and radiant presence that supports your weight and heals your spirit as you become a permanent part of the geological history of the world. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the sleep of the ancient watchtower. At the highest point of the city walls, the ancient watchtower stands as a silent sentinel, looking out over the misty expanse of the Weser Valley, and the watchman has long since leaned his spear against the stone and closed his eyes, listening to the rhythmic creaking of the wooden stairs and the soft hooting of an owl in the distance. And the air up here is thin and crisp and carries the scent of wood smoke and the oncoming rain, providing a sensory anchor that helps to clear the mind of the clutter of the day. And as you visualize the view from the tower, you can see the lights of the town fading one by one until the entire valley is a single, indistinguishable sea of darkness, and shadow and the city walls are a protective circle that keeps the uncertainties of the wilderness at bay, allowing the history of Hamelin to sleep in peace within its stone embrace. And we consider the thousands of nights that this tower has stood against the wind and the snow, and how it remains unchanged by the dramas of the humans who walk beneath it. And this stability is a source of profound comfort as you let go of the need to watch or to guard or to know, and simply allow yourself to be carried by the rotation of the earth toward the center of the night. And the piper's song is the vibration of the wind against the battlements, a sound that is as old as the world and as steady as the stars. And as you drift away from the tower and into the clouds, you find that you are no longer the watcher, but are the night itself, covering the world in a blanket of absolute and unchanging rest. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the sleeping garden of the herbalist, as the watchman's heavy eyelids finally close in the tower, we drift down into the walled garden of the town's herbalist, where the rows of lavender and rosemary are silvered by the midnight frost, and the air is thick with the scent of damp soil and crushed mint leaves, providing a natural balm that settles over your senses like a cooling compress. And in this garden, every plant has a purpose and a season, but tonight they are all equal in their shared silence as they draw their energy back into the roots beneath the frozen crust of the earth. And as you visualize these sleeping stems, you can feel your own energy retreating from the surface of your skin and settling into the core of your being, where it is warm and safe and undisturbed by the wind. And we consider the bees who are huddled in their hives at the garden's edge, their wings still, and their collective hum reduced to a faint and steady throb that matches the vibration of the earth's own magnetic field. And the piper's flute is now the sound of the frost crystallizing on the leaves, a microscopic and rhythmic clicking that signals the final transition from the active day into the passive night. And as you breathe in the herbal air, you feel a profound sense of rootedness, as if you are being planted in the fertile soil of your own dreams, where you can grow in silence without the need for light or rain. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the stillness of the blacksmith's anvil in the center of the town. The blacksmith's forge has finally gone cold, and the heavy iron anvil sits in the center of the workshop like a dark and silent altar to the labor of the day. And the air here is metallic and still carrying the faint smell of coal smoke and quenched iron, which acts as a grounding force for the mind, helping to anchor your consciousness in the solid reality of the physical world. And as you visualize the anvil, you can feel the strength and the permanence of the metal, which has been struck 10,000 times and yet remains unchanged and unyielding. And this stability is a source of great comfort as you let go of the fleeting worries of the mind and adopt the density of the iron, allowing your body to become heavy and still in the gravity of the night. And we consider the rhythmic sound of the hammer that once filled this space, now replaced by a silence so deep that you can hear the settling of the soot on the floor, and the piper's song is the memory of the heat in the coals, a low and radiant glow that warms the spirit without demanding action or attention. And as you drift within this forge of the soul, you find that the fires of the day have been extinguished, leaving only the tempered strength of a rest that is as solid as the earth and as enduring as the stone. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the ice caves of the blue light, deep beneath the peaks of the Koppen Mountain, we find the hidden ice caves where the water from the ancient glaciers has frozen into massive, translucent pillars that glow with a faint and ethereal blue light. And the air here is perfectly dry and perfectly still, holding the temperature of a perpetual winter that preserves everything it touches in a state of crystalline perfection. And as you move through these caverns in your mind, you can see the reflections of your own thoughts dancing on the surface of the ice like flickering shadows on a wall of glass. And the silence here is absolute, providing a sanctuary from the vibrations of the world above, where the only movement is the slow expansion of the ice as it breathes with the seasons. And we consider the ancient air bubbles trapped within the pillars, which contain the atmosphere of the world, as it was thousands of years ago, providing a direct connection to the purity of the past. And the piper's flute is now the sound of the light moving through the ice, a silent and harmonic vibration that aligns your consciousness with the frequency of the stars. And as you sink into the blue darkness of the cave, you find that you are no longer a creature of flesh and blood, but are a creature of light and geometry, moving through the silence with a grace that knows no boundaries and no end. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the library of the silent scribes, we return now to the scriptorium of the ancient monastery, where the rows of empty desks stand in the moonlight like a fleet of wooden ships waiting for the tide, and the air is filled with the scent of old parchment and beeswax, and the faint, sharp smell of the iron gall ink that has been used to record the history of the world. And as you visualize the silent scribes who once sat here, you can feel the patience and the dedication that went into every letter and every flourish of the quill. And this patience is now yours as you let go of the need to tell your own story and simply allow yourself to be a blank page in the book of the night. And the silence of the library is a living thing, a dense and heavy presence that protects the wisdom of the past from the noise of the present. And the piper's song is the rhythmic scratching of a ghost quill on the parchment, a sound that is so faint it becomes a part of the silence itself. And as you drift within this archive of the soul, you find that the words are no longer necessary because the truth is found in the space between the lines and in the stillness of the air as you sink into the final chapter of a rest that is as deep as the ink and as long as the history of the stars. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the sleep of the ancient. Oak at the edge of the forest stands a bishal oak tree that was a sapling when the piper first came to Hamelin. and its roots reach deep into the soil of the valley, touching the buried stones of the Roman roads and the hidden veins of the groundwater, and the bark of the tree is thick and furrowed like the skin of an ancient giant, providing a home for thousands of tiny creatures who sleep in the crevices of the wood. And as you visualize this tree, you can feel its immense strength and its total lack of hurry as it breathes in a cycle that lasts for decades and centuries. And the movement of the sap through the trunk is a slow and steady pulse that matches the rhythm of the universe. And the piper's song is the rustle of the last remaining leaves in the high branches, a sound that tells the story of the wind and the sun and the rain in a language that requires no ears to hear. And as you sink into the roots of the tree, you find that you are becoming part of the earth itself, a permanent and peaceful fixture in a world that is always changing and yet always the same. And the mountain called Koppen is the shadow that the tree casts across the valley, a blanket of protection that ensures the rest of the world remains unbroken until the cycle begins again. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the loom of the starry night. The night continues to weave its tapestry on a cosmic loom where the stars are the shuttles and the darkness is the thread, and the pattern being created is one of infinite complexity and perfect balance where every point of light has its place and every shadow has its purpose. And as you lie there, you can feel yourself being woven into this pattern, becoming a part of the celestial architecture that supports the world. And the sound of the loom is the low frequency hum of the vacuum of space, a sound that is so deep it can only be felt in the silence of the heart. And we consider the distance between the stars and how it is filled with a peace that is absolute and unchanging. And the piper's song is the vibration of the light as it travels through the void, a silver thread that connects your spirit to the center of the galaxy. And as you drift within this starry fabric, you find that you're no longer a passenger on the earth, but are a citizen of the universe, moving with the grace of the planets and the stillness of the nebulae toward a rest that has no beginning and no end. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the sleep of the ancient cathedral. Within the stone walls of the Hamelin Cathedral, the air is cool and smells of incense and old stone, and the silence is a physical weight that presses against the spirit in a comforting and protective embrace, and the stained glass windows are dark now, their vibrant colors turned to shades of gray and charcoal by the midnight air. And as you move through the nave in your mind, you can see the light of the stars reflecting off the polished marble floors like tiny sparks of fire in a frozen sea. And the cathedral is a vessel for the prayers and the dreams of 1,000 years, and it holds them all in a state of perfect preservation where they are no longer requests, but are simply vibrations in the stone. And the piper's song is the echo of a choir that has long since fallen silent, a sound that is felt rather than heard, and that guides the soul toward the altar of the eternal rest. And as you sink into the foundations of the cathedral, you find that you are as steady and as strong as the pillars themselves, a part of the history of the world that will never be forgotten or disturbed. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the stillness of the ancient wells deep beneath the streets of the invisible city. The ancient wells continue to listen, to the silence of the earth, their water as clear as glass and as cold as the ice on the Koppen peaks, and the sound of a single drop of water falling into the depths is a chime that resonates through the stone and into the soul, creating a series of concentric circles that expand outward till they touch the very edges of existence. And as you visualize these wells, you can feel the depth and the security of the dark water, which has seen the rise and fall of civilizations and yet remains unchanged. And the piper's song is the vibration of the water against the stone, a rhythmic and liquid pulse that acts as a lullaby for the spirits of the valley. And as you sink into the depths of the well, you find that the water is not a liquid, but is a state of being where you are free to float in a void of perfect and unchanging peace. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the sleep of the ancient orchard. The fruit trees in the orchard have finally surrendered their leaves to the wind, and they stand in the moonlight like silver skeletons waiting for the return of the sun. And the air here is crisp and smells of cold earth and fallen apples, and the silence is broken only by the rhythmic creaking of the branches as they move in the breeze. And as you visualize this orchard, you can feel the rest that comes from a completed harvest, where the work is done, and the only duty is to survive the winter in a state of suspended animation, and the piper's song is the rustle of the dry grass against the stone walls, a sound that tells the story of the seasons in a language of pure texture and light. And as you sink into the mulch of the orchard floor, you find that you are becoming a part of the cycle of the earth, a permanent and peaceful fixture in a world that is always turning and always dreaming. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the stillness of the ancient smithy. The fire in the smithy has been extinguished, and the iron has cooled, and the tools are resting in their racks in a state of perfect and rhythmic order, and the air is heavy with the scent of coal and quenched metal, providing a grounding force that helps to settle the mind and to anchor the body in the solid reality of the world. And as you visualize the smithy, you can feel the strength and the permanence of the metal, which has been forged in fire and tempered in water, and which now rests in a state of absolute and unchanging stillness. And the piper's song is the memory of the hammer on the anvil, a rhythmic and metallic pulse that acts as a guide for the soul as it moves through the shadows of the night toward the center of a rest that is as solid as the iron and as deep as the earth. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the sleep of the ancient weaver. The loom has fallen silent, and the weaver has departed, and the fabric remains in the dark, a masterpiece of shadow and light that tells the story of the valley in a language of thread and wool. And as you visualize this fabric, you can feel the softness and the strength of the weaving, which has been created with a patience and a dedication that knows no limits. And the silence of the weaver's attic is a protective barrier that keeps the noise of the world at bay, allowing the history of Hamelin to sleep in peace within its wooden embrace. And the piper's song is the vibration of the tension in the threads, a steady and wordless pulse that guides the spirit toward a rest that is total and absolute and unchanging. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the stillness of the ancient harbor. The ships are moored, and the sails are furled, and the water laps against the hulls with a rhythmic and liquid sound that is the most ancient lullaby of the world. And as you visualize the harbor, you can feel the stability and the safety of the land, which supports the weight of the sea and the weight of the city in a state of perfect equilibrium, and the mist is thick and heavy, obscuring the horizon and creating a world that is only a few feet wide and filled with the scent of pine tar and cold water, and the piper's song is the signal of a phantom ship that moves through the fog without a sound or a ripple, inviting the soul to follow the current into the heart of the darkness where there are no storms and no rocks, only the infinite depth of the rest. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the sleep of the ancient library. The books are closed, and the scribes are gone, and the ink is dry, and the history of the world remains in the dark, a masterpiece of shadow and parchment that tells the story of the valley in a language of silence and light. And as you visualize the library, you can feel the weight and the permanence of the knowledge which has been preserved with a patience and a dedication that knows no end. And the silence of the library is a living thing, a dense and heavy presence that protects the wisdom of the past from the noise of the present, and the piper's song is the rhythmic scratching of a ghost quill on the silver leaves of a book that can only be read when the eyes are closed and the mind is as still as a frozen lake. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the stillness of the ancient watchtower. The watchman is asleep, and the spear is leaning against the wall, and the view from the tower is a landscape of pure darkness and absolute peace, and the air is thin and crisp and carries the scent of wood smoke and the oncoming dawn, which is still a lifetime away. And as you visualize the tower, you can feel the stability and the strength of the stone which has stood against the wind and the snow for hundreds of years, and which remains unchanged by the dramas of the humans who walk beneath it. And the piper's song is the vibration of the wind against the battlements, a sound that is as old as the world and as steady as the stars. And as you drift away from the tower and into the clouds, you find that you are no longer the watcher, but are the night itself, covering the world in a blanket of absolute and unchanging rest. The Chronicles of Hamelin, the final silence of the Koppen Mountain, and finally we reach the heart of the mountain called Koppen, where the children are sleeping in a bed of silver moss and velvet shadows, and where the concept of time has been replaced by the concept of being. And the darkness here is a radiant and welcoming presence that heals every worry and cures every doubt. And the piper's song has finally faded into a single and eternal note that is the sound of the universe, breathing in a state of perfect and unchanging peace. And you're here now at the end of the journey and the beginning of the dream. And the mountain has closed its heavy stone doors to keep the modern world out and the ancient silence in. And you are the stone, and you are the shadow, and you are the rest. And as the final echo of the history of Hamelin dissolves into the void, you find that there is nothing left to do and nowhere left to go, because you have arrived at the center of the world and the center of yourself. And the only thing that remains is the absolute and unchanging perfection of a sleep that has no end and no beginning and no name.